Well, certainly this is the day that the Lord has made. We are rejoicing and we are glad in it. How wonderful it is to be with the wonderful people there at First United Methodist Church there in the city of LA. So very glad to see you again virtually. To your wonderful pastor, thank you so much, Pastor Mandy, for this invitation to share a few words about lament and finding God. And I want to share those words from the lectionary reading there in Job 23. Job is answering one of his friends, and he answers his friends by saying, "Today also my complaint is bitter. His hand is heavy despite my groaning. Oh, that I knew where I might find him, that I might come even to his dwelling. I would lay my case before him and fill my mouth with arguments. I would learn what he would answer me and understand what he would say to me. Would he contend with me in the greatness of his power? No, but he would give heed to me. There, an upright person could reason with him, and I should be acquitted forever by my judge. If I go forward, he is not there, or backward, I cannot perceive him. On the left, he hides, and I cannot behold him. I turn to the right, but I cannot see him. God has made my heart faint. The Almighty has terrified me. If only I could vanish in darkness, and thick darkness could cover my face." Would you pray with me? And now, God, let the words of my mouth and the meditations of my heart be acceptable in thy sight. O Lord, my strength and my redeemer. Amen. This past Thursday, my wife and I decided to lay on the couch and watch TV. I had had enough of pastoring in divinity school, and my wife had had enough of working in med school. So we decided to pick up one of our traditions again and to sit on the couch and to catch up on all of our TV shows that we have missed during the week. We call this deep couch laying. Phones went off. Emails, notifications went on do not disturb. Books were put away. And our eyes were firmly fixed on our 56-inch screen TV in our family room. And on the TV was our favorite game show, Family Feud. You know Family Feud, two families, one questions, the top answers on the board. Let's play Family Feud. And on this particular episode, Steve Harvey, the show's host, had just read the question to the husband who was the team captain. You can tell that he didn't know the answer to the question, and to his credit, the question was difficult. He did not have a clue as to what the answer was, but his wife did. And like every good wife who knows that it's a matter of just coming to the rescue, she decided to come to the rescue and to give her husband the answer. Right before the buzzer sounded, the husband blurted out an answer, and here's the sad part. Number one, it was not the answer that his wife gave him. And then number two, and worst of all, she was right and he was wrong. You should have seen the disappointment on her face when she looked at her husband on national TV and said to him, "You never listen to me. You never listen to me." There is no other character in the biblical literary canon that understands the anger, pain, and the frustration of suffering than Job. And what seems like the batting of an eye, everything that Job loved and everything that he worked for, everything that he owned, everything that made Job into the man that he was gone. Children and animals, wealth, friends, and even Job's health, all taken away for him, all because of a silly bet between God and Satan. And it seems like there is nothing that Job can do or say that will move God to at least explain God's self to Job. In fact, that's all Job really wants. Job really wants an explanation. Job doesn't ask for his children back or the new farm or new money or reparations for all that Job has lost. No, Job just simply asks for an explanation. One simple explanation would satisfy Job's curiosity. One simple explanation would add meaning to Job's suffering, and yet God, the culprit of Job's suffering, denies Job an explanation. God is silent. Job is suffering. But the story isn't all about Job, isn't it? Job isn't the only person suffering in this story. There's another character bearing the weight of Job's suffering on her shoulders. There's someone else in the background of Job's story who is just as angry, just as confused, just as frustrated as Job is. This story of the misfortune of Job is also about Mrs. Job, Job's wife. You know, she's suffering too. All of her children are gone. All of her wealth, all gone. Everything that she has done to help build her husband and her family to the place that it was, all gone. And on top of that, she is now being forced to put all of her questions and her emotions aside so that she could take care of the failing health of her husband. It's easy to overlook Job's wife. It's easy to overlook her place in this story because, number one, she's a woman. And this patriarchal lens of the editors only brings Job and his male friends' stories to the front of this text. But worst of all, we don't know about Mrs. Job's side of the story because Job, her own husband, silenced her in Job chapter 2. In Job chapter 2, Mrs. Job comes to Job with some advice that I think was the best advice Job received in the whole book. She sees Job suffering. She sees Job trying to maintain his integrity in the face of divine chaos. And she stops Job and says to Job, Job, you should curse God and die. Job, this is enough. Job, you don't have to go through this without an explanation. Job, curse God and die. Job refuses to hear his wife. He says to her, you sound like a foolish woman. And he turns from her to listen to his foolish friends. He never listens to me. I think Job's wife has some good advice for him. I think Job's wife's advice may have some major implications for Job and for us as we endure our own sufferings. Mrs. Job has it right. It was the answer Job needed all along. Essentially, what Mrs. Job tells her husband is this: call God out. Get the answers that you need, Job. Argue your case before God. Hold God to God's standards of justice. Press God to give you an explanation. Job, you need to be real with God. This is what Job's wife tells Job. Job, just be real with God. And even if you die, at least you have died with some answers. And Job made the mistake of hiding his anger and his frustration in a time where he should have presented his anger and his frustration to God. And Mrs. Job tries to get her husband to see that in the moments when our spirits are most troubled and most frustrated, those are the moments when we need to be the most honest with God. Those are the moments where we trade our garments of praise for sackcloth and ashes. Those are the moments where we trade our hallelujahs for Lord, why? Or Lord, how long? Those are the moments where we set aside our Bibles and seek God for a fresh word concerning our suffering. Those are the moments in which we need to be real with God. Job's wife teaches us the importance of lament. And church, we need lament now more than ever. Our churches should be full of devoted Christians every Sunday morning, searching for God and asking God to give us an explanation. God, why have you allowed the inhumane treatment of Haitian refugees at the border? God, why have you allowed the total destruction of our planet and our world? God, where are you? Where are you when Black sons call out in their fear for their lives to their Black mothers, while some police officer is kneeling on their necks? God, why did you allow one virus to disrupt and control our lives? God, do you not see the injustice? Do you not see the evil and the hatred and the ignorance and the pain and the suffering? God, do you not care? Job's wife's advice was to call God out, to seek God, and to seek God for an explanation. Essentially, Job's wife asked Job to ask God, what are you going to do about this? You know, that's what I find myself asking God some days. What are you going to do about this, God? I've done my part. I've prayed. I've voted. I've been to the marches. I've educated myself. I've educated my friends. I've educated my family. And now here we are, God. Things continue to be the same. What are you going to do about this? Job's wife teaches us that there are moments where we need to set aside our praises and put on our garments of lament. Job's wife teaches us that what we need are Christians who are willing to turn our cathedrals of praise into courtrooms of justice and demand of God some answers. And I hear you. You're saying, who am I to demand of God to answer me? Who am I to put God on the stand to demand justice of God? Who am I? You know, Job had those same apprehensions. Job had to learn that although God was sovereign, that God did what God pleased to do, how and when God pleased to do it. Yes, Job had to learn that God was sovereign, but Job also had to learn that he was God's child. That's the right that we have, to put God on the stand and demand justice from God. It's because we are God's children, adopted into God's family through God's love and God's grace. And as children of God, we are entitled to moments where we are able to be real with our heavenly parent. I'll never forget learning the spirituals. The spirituals were songs written by my enslaved ancestors when the hymns of the church failed to express their pain by the hand of their lived experiences. One such spiritual that I learned growing up as a boy was, I've been in the storm so long. And the lyrics of the spiritual goes, I've been in the storm so long. I've been in the storm so long, children. I've been in the storm so long. Oh, give me a little time to pray. And I can only imagine what that prayer sounded like. These enslaved ancestors were not praying for good fortune, but they were really praying for a way to be faithful to God, even in the midst of suffering, in the midst of slavery. Beloved, you may have some questions about how to be faithful to God in the middle of whatever sufferings that you're going through. I want you today to listen to Job's wife. Hear what she says. Again, call God out. Because Job's wife teaches us that through lament, we're able to find new and authentic ways to be faithful to God while we're enduring suffering. Through lament, we're able to find creative, unique, and authentic ways to keep our promise to God, even when it seems like God has not kept God's promise to us. Lament may not help us to understand what God is doing, but it may help us to see that God is at work doing something on our behalf. Lament may not give us all the answers that we think that we need in order to get through, but lament invites God into our sufferings. Lament invites the creator of the universe to come sit in sackcloth and ashes, and to times get better. In my tradition, I can hear my big mama is what we call grandmothers or great grandmothers. I can hear my big mama say from my tradition that God is a heavy load sharer. And she would pray these long prayers of just telling God how things were down here on earth. She would pray these long prayers of just telling God how she felt about the conditions that she was living in. And she would pray long prayers telling God about how she felt about the things that she went through personally. And I believe that God showed her that he was a heavy load sharer because she called God out. She cried out to God. And God heard her prayer. Job finally takes his wife's advice. And here we are in chapter 23. And in chapter 23, this chapter might be important to us today because here it is. Job finally calls God out. And he shows his wife a kind of kindness by simply proving to himself that it's all right to call God out. It's all right to be angry with God. It's all right to be frustrated with God. And in fact, somewhere in between chapter 2 and chapter 23, Job gives himself permission to be angry with God. Not worrying about what the circumstances will be or worrying about what the consequences rather would be for being angry with God. No, Job needed some answers and he calls God out. Can I encourage you? I know this is going to sound weird, but be angry with God. Be frustrated with God. Don't hide those emotions from God. God sees them anyway. If you believe that God knows all things, God knows when you're angry with God. God knows when you're upset with God. And I believe that if you will rent your clothes and put on your sackcloths and ashes, I believe that you will discover a God who understands your anger and your frustration. You know, I could not serve a God who was not big enough to handle the moments when I'm angry with God. I would not serve a God who's not big enough to handle the moments when I'm frustrated with God. I would not serve a God who could not stand and allow me to ask God some questions about what I'm going through. And there it is. Job's wife teaches us that if you call God out, God will answer you. God will respond. By lamenting and crying out to God, by searching for God, Job sets himself up for an encounter with God that is going to not only transform his life, but it's going to transform his suffering. You too can have that encounter with God. You too can experience the vastness and the greatness of God in your own personal lives, but you have to have the courage of Job's wife to lament, to be real with God. In the name of the one who cried out one Friday, my God, why hast thou forsaken me? Amen.